Well. Good morning, West Ham fans. Ross on the West Ham Network. Hope you are safe and well. So, obviously, 3 games in a row, 3 defeats in a row. Not great at all. But who's out there? Who could take over for Moisey eventually?
They'll lynch you, but he did, and he laughs at
So, according to Sean Wheaton, he said the 6-game rule is in play. I'm sure you're well aware that that's Mr. Sullivan's sort of litmus test. If there's 6 consecutive defeats in a row, the manager goes. That's and it's always been. There's a few times this season, or last season particularly, where we got to like 4 or 5, and then we ended up beating Forest or Everton last time. If I remember, that was the that was called famously the Sean Dyche derby last year, when obviously Fat Frank was in charge of Everton, and the loser got Sean Dyche. And I had this vision of almost like a shark cage with Sean Dyche in it, and as the game's going, he's going one way into the dugout, or he's going on to the Everton dugout, and then eventually just takes over. But anyway, we actually did a similar thing last year, actually, when the same conversation happened, and sort of looking at available managers. Now, I think the difference between now and in terms of, the next manager's coming to West Ham, and there will be a new manager that comes in at West Ham eventually. And so I'm not assuming it's in the next 3 games. I'm not assuming it could be at the end of the season. It could be at the end of a new contract for Mr. I mean, obviously there's 3 alternatives there, but there needs to, but I thought it'd be interesting to look at, because people are saying, "Oh, Moyes out, anyone but Moyes," but really anyone but Moyes? I don't think so. I think sometimes you got to, think about the narrative you're saying there in terms of that. But I thought it'd be worthwhile to look at managers who are available, or managers who could potentially become the next manager of West Ham. I'm not saying it's going to happen in the next 3 games. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is it's worth looking at that. And this would obviously, you assume, as part of the sporting director's remit in terms of the technical director, Tim Steindem, that he's looking at the next person. And same with the Brighton when Potter left, they had De Zerbi lined up. And there may well be a pearl in a B-side or someone like that Steindem will pluck straight into West Ham. Like he did with Xabi Alonso, for example. He took him from Real Sociedad B and brought him to Leverkusen. And we'll talk about him because he's one of the people. At the moment, I think Moyes is about 33-1 on to be the next manager to be sacked in the Premier League, which puts him about sort of mid-table, which I think is probably fair in terms of the Premier League as a whole, in all honesty. The likes of Luton, Bournemouth, until they maybe obviously Bournemouth changed their manager. Gary O'Neill left in the summer, and they brought in Eroni, and until the game against Burnley, which they should have won anyway, he was almost one of the favourites to be sacked next, and he still could be, I think, with a couple more poor games with him. So they moved from a pragmatic style to a more progressive style, and it sort of fits and starts really, despite spending a lot of money as well. But anyway, so in terms of the managers, let me take it. So in terms of the betting odds, here's a top 20 down the left-hand side, and then it continues over to the other side. So Potter's favourite, then it's Xabi Alonso, Will Steele, Michael Carrick, you can see there, Paulo Fonseca, Marco Bielsa, Mark Noble is 3, 4, 5, 6th favourite, Sean Dyche, Hasenhüttl, Jose Mourinho, Carlos Corberán, Nuno Espirito Santos, Thomas Frank, Ruben Amorim, Company, Allardyce is still there. Allardyce is in the top 20. Roger Schmidt, Mark Warburton's there. Nigel Pearson. I mean, anyone apart from David Moyes, Nigel Pearson? I don't think so, in all honesty. Now, obviously, looking into that, we're in a different situation now to maybe when we were looking, when there was this issue last year, in that we have Tim Steindem. And for me, it's Steindem will want to bring in a younger manager to work alongside him in the same way he did with Xabi Alonso. That sort of that more European modern style of sort of management. You have a sporting director working with a manager who's used to working with a sporting director as well, or a technical director. I mean, potato, director of football, whatever you want to call him. But technically, he's technical director. So looking through that list, I've basically taken out a few. Here's a list. I've taken out a few already. Bielsa, I think he's long gone now, in my humble opinion. Sean Dyche, I don't think that would really. And I think I'm trying to balance, what would appease the fans as well. Mourinho, I think, is an age issue, and I think there'll be a reluctance for him to work with. Although he worked with Pinto, Thiago Pinto at Roma as sporting director. I just don't think he's going to be. If we're talking about Moyes ball, Mourinho ball's just as worse, to be honest. Although he's obviously highly successful. Nuno Espirito Santos, the same thing. Sam Allardyce have taken out, Mark Warburton have taken out, Nigel Pearson, and Frank Lampard as well. Although, maybe a return of Frank Lampard, potentially. God, what am I saying? Anyway, so looking at that, what I thought I'd do is I'll go through them in a little bit more detail, and not everyone's particular, but I've taken sort of the top sort of 5 or 6, and then a couple of the picks, couple of Buttons picks. So let's start with Potter. And it's just a bit of facts and figures, really, and just to get sort of so you've got some what's the word? So you've got some insight. If these names are going to be bandied around for the next 3 or 4 weeks at least. So obviously he's 48, 440 games, first team games he's managed in his career. His only honour has been the Swedish Cup. He's got a win ratio of 42%, and obviously these differ between club to club and league to league, but in total 185 games, 42%. And managed Chelsea, as we know, Brighton, is managed Swansea, and Östersund. He prefers to play a 4-3-2-1. So, you would assume with a 4-2-3-1, maybe with the current setup, the current sort of side we've got, a back three of Aged, Zuma, and Mavropanos, with Emerson, with maybe Sufal on the other side, with probably JWP, Alvarez, and then Paqueta, Bowen, Antonio Bowen, or Kudos, and Bowen up front. So that's how it could work. Obviously, with Potter, he's, and again, I'm trying to look at it subjectively. Obviously, he comes in. A lot of people have been calling for Potter. He plays a very progressive style of football. The style of, and arguably, one of the main criticisms of Potter's time at Brighton, and particularly from what I remember hearing from the West Ham board when they're talking about Potter as a potential, is they thought that actually he was helped by Brighton's supercomputer. But obviously now we've got that system starting to get into place now at West Ham. So be interested to see what happens, what could happen potentially. He knows how to fit into a system with a director of football. He does play a very progressive style. We see at Chelsea, maybe that was a job too far for him. Arguably Brighton have improved since he's left as well, in terms of becoming more, with De Zerbi ball, more attacking, more exciting to watch. Again, this is just me putting together some ideas and having some thoughts. And I think, obviously the Chelsea job didn't work well for him, but maybe working with a different caliber of, I see the caliber of players he's working with Brighton were, unknowns, but he built them up, and that's the Brighton model. Chelsea, they're all sort of established, professional players who have played for many years and maybe elevated wages and things like that. And maybe at West Ham it could be a happy medium. Possibly. We shall see. Now, obviously, one of the big names that's been mentioned, and partly because of the Tim Steinton connection, is Xabi Alonso, who's actually just signed a new deal with in the summer with Bayer Leverkusen. So his contract doesn't expire until I think it's 2027. I think so. It would cost a lot to get him out of contract. To be honest, he's 41. Only managed 148 games, 46%. Win ratio, no honours won currently in his career, managerial career. Obviously, he's won plenty of honours as a player, lots of experience in the Premier League as well, but not management, but obviously playing. Obviously, he's currently manager of Bayer Leverkusen, and previously he was Real Sociedad B before he was sort of handpicked, so to speak, to become the Bayer Leverkusen manager. He plays he preferred style as a 3-4-3, which would favour a lot of West Ham fans, I think, in terms of, very forward thinking. We saw how much they tore us a new one at the when we had the pre-season friendly, and they do play a very nice style of football. They're very good, very high press. I think on paper he sounds fantastic, but are we going to pay his contract out? That's the honest opinion. We know that Mr. Sullivan doesn't tend to buy out people's contracts, so that to me would suggest that the likelihood is he's probably reluctant to do that. He'll cost a lot to get out of contract, that's for sure. Whether he's got a minimum release clause in there, he'll also be highly sought after. So it's someone you have to make a play for sooner rather than later. I'm sure the likes of a lot of Premier League sides, a lot of La Liga sides are looking at him, being Spanish as well. So as well as other, German clubs and French, and all the big clubs will be looking at him because he's a very impressive manager. Whether that transpires into him becoming the next West Ham manager, we shall see. Whether that transpires in maybe using West Ham as a stepping stone into a big job, that could happen as well. And I think we in the same way that some of the players we have got at the moment, likes of Lucas Paqueta, maybe Kudus, these guys are seeing West Ham as a stepping stone for a bigger club, like Paqueta going to Man City, for example, in the next summer. Highly likely. Kudus, I still think that you look at Liverpool and if Salah goes to the Saudi Pro League, someone like Kudus they'd be looking at naturally, just because of what he brings and what he could bring to a side. And I was listening to Talk Sport the other day, and they were talking about vultures, not Moyes out vultures, Moyes in vultures, but vultures sort of looking around the. If vultures looking at your club, at your players, it means you're doing something right and you're recruiting right. So we'll see what happens. But I think in terms of manager, he's a very exciting manager. There's no denying that. He's very exciting. I think another person who's very exciting, he's gone a little bit quiet recently because he hasn't done as well as he did last year, was Will Still. Actually, he's not English, he's English and Belgium as well. He's got dual citizenship. 31, very young, only 64 games, so very inexperienced. No major honours. He's got 31 wins, 48% win ratio. Currently at Stade Rennes. Prefers a 4-2-3-1, so similar to the way we're set up now. Now, obviously, he's got his badges now. Famously, he didn't have his badges last year, and they were paying tens of thousands of euros each week, Stade Rennes, to have him as in the dugout because he was doing such a good job. He's a West Ham fan as well, which is a huge thing. Personally, I know that very true, and the person that's really pissing off Stade Rennes because I know that for a fact because Phil's told me. So he's a friend of the channel. So there we go. So he's got my thumbs up. But I think it's really interesting with Will. I think it's too soon. Possibly, but then people go back and look at someone like Alonso, who was at who's at Real Olympiacos B, hasn't managed anything top flight, so to speak, and gets straight into a Bundesliga side. And yeah, that could be done. That can be done. You look at Will's pedigree in terms of the games, the sides he's played for. a Liga side took a chance on him. Obviously, he's bilingual as well, same as Alonso, for example. So that's useful. He's bilingual, but also he speaks French fantastically well, as we know, as we've seen, and we do have a lot of French boys in the club. So, would he command the same level of respect as Xabi Alonso? I wouldn't think so. But in terms of him developing youth team players, you see, or taking chances on players, you look at like Florian Balogun last year. He was on loan from Arsenal and was absolutely on fire for them. So again, I think it's an interesting one to think about. Personally, I think it's a bit too soon for Will. I'll be honest. But then when is the right time? I don't know. That's the whole idea. Just this is pure just going through and just trying to look at things from a sort of looking top down sort of perspective. The next one is Michael Carrick. Now, Carrick is, as we know, a former West Ham player. He's 42. He's managed 53 games so far. No major honours as yet. He's got a 55% win ratio, 29 games. He's currently manager at Middlesbrough, and he was previously caretaker at Man United, but prefers again a 4-2-3-1. It does seem to be the formation that many younger managers are preferring. Now, obviously, Carrick comes with West Ham pedigree. He comes with a tradition of having, former players, becoming managers, the likes of Billy Bonds, the likes of Slaven Bilic, the likes of Harry Redknapp, the likes of Kerbishley, these guys, and back and forth, you go back even further, you sort of, the Boot Boys brigade in terms of, developing through there and people who are youth team managers and progressing into there, and that sort of traditional way of looking at it. Michael Carrick does fit into that rhetoric, but that's a different rhetoric, I'd suggest, than currently now in terms of having a director of football, and so that could be an even ground in terms of sort of the new style of football and the old style, or the West Hamness, and maybe Carrick could be the man who combines the two. Potentially. He's got experience, albeit relatively short experience, managing in the Premier League with Man United. Man United, huge, club and egos and personalities, and he managed to do reasonably well in a short caretaker spot. Last year he was doing really well, but not as much of a great season compared to last season for him. But he does he has a nice style of football. He's got some good players. We've been linked to looking at some of his players over the last sort of year or so. And it could be a really, again, the thing is, whoever you're going to pick is a gamble, isn't it? Whoever you're going to pick. When you went and got a bloody Premier League manager, Pellegrini, a Premier League winning manager, it didn't work. So, it's a gamble. It is a gamble what happens. But I think with Carrick, I think that could be an interesting one to look at in a bit more detail. And what we will do, we'll go through these, we'll go through some of these managers in a bit more detail, in terms of, how many goals per game they score and things, all these types of things we can include. In terms of the next one, I've looked at Paulo Fonseca. He's 4th or 5th favorite, I think. Now Fonseca's completely away from all the others, in my opinion. Maybe not so much Potter, but I'd say more than Potter, because I think you look at his pedigree. He's played 512. He's managed 512 games. He's won, although there should be a space there, the Ukrainian League 3 times, the Ukrainian Cup, the Super Cup, but he was manager of Shakhtar Donetsk. So they are the main club really in the Ukraine. So you would imagine he would have won those titles. He's won 57% of his games. Majority of them were being in Shakhtar, where they dominated during his time there. He's managed in France. He's currently Lille's manager. He's managed in Italy, Roma, obviously under Pinto, the current sporting director, Shakhtar, and then he did do a lot around Portugal. So Braga, Pacos Ferreira twice, Porto, Desportivo Aves, and not even going to pronounce the last one. Again, a 4-2-3-1 he prefers. Now on paper, he there's a lot of he's won a lot of games. He's won a lot of things as well. But when you look at it, I think there's a bit of a, particularly his stuff in Portugal. It was until he went to Shakhtar Donetsk, there wasn't really much to write home about. When he went to Shakhtar Donetsk, it then put him onto the world stage, so to speak, and then Roma came calling, and then Lille have come calling since. Obviously, at Lille, he's managed lots of great players, the likes of Jonathan David and people like that, people that we like as well, in terms of, players we'd love to see at West Ham. I think it does slightly worry me, his time in Portugal. There's a lot of jumping about between clubs and coming back to clubs, and and so maybe he got lucky at Shakhtar, and then that put him into a different realm, maybe, or maybe he got stuck in a rut in Portugal. I don't know. Very experienced manager. Has worked with a sporting director, but is he? That's the thing. Would he appease the fans? Would Paulo Fonseca coming in? Again, there's no Premier League experience. Does that matter? It might do, it might not. Again, this is not. I'm not saying who's going to be the next. I'm just trying to go through the motions and talk through the players, or the managers potentially who could come in. Next one, let's look at Ralph Hasenhüttl, and the reason why Ralph, he's older, he's 56. But he does come with Premier League experience and Bundesliga experience. He's won what was the Bundesliga league title with Leipzig, I believe it was. He's over 500 games, plays a 4-4-2, which again is relatively unusual. But it's the relationship with Germany and obviously the Premier League. He's got experience. He does play. He did play quite a progressive style of football. Southampton were always a really strong side to play against. Obviously, didn't work towards the end, and he was sacked when they weren't performing. But I think he could be one of those outside chances. Whether someone like Tim Steindl, and again, the thing is, obviously, where before it was whoever the board would be happy to work with. This is a bit different now. This is about who Tim Steindl can work with. He's sort of the conduit between the board and the management and the pitch management, so to speak, the players, the managers in the dugout. So it's who he can work with. Now, I would imagine he would have he'd have probably had some relationship with Ralph, with his time at Leipzig and his time at Leverkusen, potentially, if not Freda Berman as well. So there may be a relationship there, and actually, that's what you want to bring. You want to have, a good relationship between the director of football and the manager. So, or whether it's a manager or a first team coach, it's another thing for debate, to be honest. So it could be interesting to see there. Maybe a bit old, potentially. Maybe a younger manager, someone in their early 40s, potentially. I don't know. There's no answers here. It's just going through some data. Let's talk about Carlos Corberán. He's 40. He's managed 183 games. Hasn't won anything. He's got a 38% win ratio, and he's currently manager at West Brom. Previously, he had a very short stint at Olympiacos. It should be Huddersfield. He had a long time managing them, Erims and Doxa as well. Again, a 4-2-3-1. Now, what I like about Carlos is his sort of stuff he did at Leeds. So he was actually assistant to Bielsa, and very much seen in terms of the style of football he plays, very much seen as Bielsa ball, but in the Championship. He's currently in the Championship. So he has got Premier League experience in the dugout, as an assistant manager, working with Bielsa, but not being the main man. Now he's 40, so he's very much in his early career. He's still got 180, 180 odd games under his belt in terms of management, and I think he could be a really interesting choice. Again, still under contract with West Brom, so that would need to be bought out. Where someone like Ralph is out of contract, Potter's out of contract, so invariably they would be cheaper options because you wouldn't have to pay out the rest of the contracts to their current club. But I think Carlos would be a really interesting one. I think if it was without Tim Steindl, I would have probably put him quite high up because it's that Bielsa thing. And, we tried to get Bielsa several times in his career and it's never worked. It's never quite, the stars haven't aligned. But, where Bielsa's, I want to say pushing 70 now. He's currently Uruguayan international manager. I just can't see him coming back to the Premier League. Can't see us selling those buckets in the club shop just yet. I think that ship has sailed. I think now the next appointment, the next manager, in my view, isn't going to be an older manager. It's going to be a younger manager. To be perfectly honest, I tell you what, when we had Gianfranco Zola, that was about 20 years, 15 years, something like that, too early. If we had a Zola type coach as our next one with a technical director, obviously we had Gianluca Nani at the time. We was well ahead of the curve then. We were well ahead of the curve. I think that'd been really interesting because he brought through a lot of youth team players, played some lovely football as well, but just was at the wrong time, wrong place, wrong time. I was thinking about it the other day. So yeah, that was great fun. I enjoyed that football there. So what I've done is I've also just picked out a few others. So not in the first column, but in the second column, because there's some interesting names there. If we talk about Ruben Amorim, he is the current Sporting Lisbon manager. He's 38, 188 games, the same as Carlos, a similar level. But he won the Portuguese league last year, and invariably then the Super Cup this year. He's won the Portuguese Cup 3 times. He's got 131 wins under his belt in 188 games. So it's over 2/3, 69% win ratio. In terms of the clubs, Sporting, Braga, and Casapia. So all in Portugal, plays a 3-4-3, similar to Alonso. Again, under contract to Sporting Lisbon, so would be have to pay out the contract. A very interesting name is Ruben Amorim. I think he hasn't really been linked with too many jobs as such, and it's a bit surprising, I think. But it might be his lack of Premier League experience or any sort of Premier League where someone like Xabi Alonso has Premier League experience in terms of playing. Ruben doesn't have that, so that might be a slight mark on his card potentially, particularly as this next. For me, this next appointment, whenever that may be, is a huge one for West Ham because it really does start the Tim Steindl sort of setup, really, isn't it? It's almost like the next one would have only known life with Tim Steindl as technical director, and that's critical because this is setting up, hopefully, the next in the sort of the future for West Ham in terms of going forward. At the moment we seem to be, because of Moyes has already been at the club for a couple of years, then Tim came in. It's sort of, 2/3 of the way into his tenure. So whoever the manager is coming in, I think would be the next one would need to fit in that system. Need to fit into that sort of Tim Steindl system. Another person I think could be a really interesting one is it's actually staying in Portugal. There's some really good managers in Portugal. Is Roger Schmidt. He's currently the Benfica manager. Now, this guy is so experienced. And the reason why is because he's German. That's why I think it could be an interesting one. He's managed almost 700 games in his managerial career. He won the Portuguese League. He's won the Super Cup. He's won the Austrian League, the Dutch Cup, the Dutch Super Cup, the Austrian Cup, the Westphalia twice, the Chinese Cup, and the Westphalia Liga. So he's won, lots of leagues, lots of cups. Out of the almost 700 games, he's won almost 400 of them. So just under 2/3. managed some big clubs: Benfica, PSV Eindhoven, BJ Guan in China, Bayer Leverkusen, RB Leipzig, Salzburg rather, PC Paderborn, PR Munster, and Del Brocken. And again, prefers to play a 4-2-3-1. Now, what's interesting about Roger Schmidt is the time in Germany, and so he would have crossed over. I don't know. I don't think it would have been with. I think when Steinton was in Leverkusen, I think he wasn't the manager. I may well be wrong on that. I haven't checked that, but the fact is, there's experience in several leagues. Where someone like Ruben, for example, has experience of just the Portuguese league, this guy has experience in the German league, in China, in the Eredivisie, and in Portugal. He is in the older age, I think, for our next manager. I think 56. Might be too experienced, maybe. Obviously, he's still currently manager at Benfica, so we have to buy his contract as well. I don't know. It'd be an interesting appointment. And again, there's the German connection. Again, really, just assuming the fact that they're the same, they're both Germans, they'll be friends. But that's what I'm trying to sort of look at. It's that partnership, it's that relationship, and there may well be a relationship already with them, by the based on the fact that they'll probably be in the Bundesliga at the same time together. So there would be some mutual respect, maybe. The last one I wanted to pick out was someone who would be a left field choice. It's Sam Allardyce. No, it's not. It's Nigel Pearson. No, it's not. It's Ruben van Nistelrooy. Obviously, goal scoring juggernauts through his time in the Premier League, in the Dutch league, in Spain, in Germany. He's scored goals everywhere. He's 47. Which was older than I thought he was. He's only managed 50 appearances. But those 50 appearances, he won the Dutch Cup and the Dutch Super Cup when he was manager of PSV Eindhoven. 34 games he won, 68% win ratio, plays a 4-3-3, and he's unattached. He is unattached. He currently hasn't got a club, and that's what might be a bit cheaper. He would be, in my view, would be someone who could. Again, he's been brought up in the. I mean, he's also been manager of. He was the assistant manager. He was assistant manager of the Dutch national side as well. I believe. So there would be, so he's got experience. He's got international experience as well. The Eredivisie is a league we've been looking at in terms of buying players. So maybe looking at the managers. I mean, I haven't looked at Arne Slot, really, the final manager. He wasn't in the top 20, but Arne Slot's someone I quite like. I think he could be really interesting. I think we've got Johnny Heitinga on the bench. He could be a potential, and his appointment was relatively random. So who knows? The former Ajax caretaker manager. So I think Van Nistelrooy would be an interesting one. There's he would command respect in terms of he knows the Premier League. He's played 150, 180 games for Man United in the Premier League, scored about 100 goals, something like that. So he knows the Premier League. Obviously, that was back in 2006, which somewhat changed a lot, but still, he hasn't got any managerial experience in the Premier League. But I just think that could be an interesting one. It could be an interesting one. I mean, to be honest, I don't really have any preferences. I think, I think whoever becomes the next manager of West Ham would have to be vetted by Tim Steinton. And he ain't done too shabby. Not Xabi Alonso. He ain't done too bad with the people he's brought in terms of players. So I trust him in terms of that. As I said, someone like Carrick could appease the West Ham fans, both sides, both new and old, I'd suggest. Xabi Alonso, very exciting. Potter. Potter. I mean, Potter has, I think he could. I think there's someone. It's obviously there's people more glamorous than Graham Potter in terms of someone like Xabi Alonso, but he could do a job. Will Steele has, although he's not particularly experienced, Paulo Fonseca, all the experience, but no Premier League experience. Ralph's got plenty of Premier League experience, but hasn't been uber successful in his time at Southampton, for example. Ruben, you've got Thomas Frank, but again, Brentford, they won't let him go cheap. Vincent Kompany, exciting brand of football. Not really worked great in the Championship. Hasn't really worked so far for Burnley in the Premier League. But that might be the fact he hasn't got the right players. It's a skill. It's a level up in terms of skill. There's so many interesting managers available. I just thought it'd be really interesting just to have a quick look through some of them. And if there's guys in there you want me to do a proper profile on, let me know in the comments below, and we can do that as little videos. But yeah, as I said, there will be a new manager West Ham at some time. In some, it might be by the end of it might be November. It might be at the end of the summer. It might be after Moyes is given a new contract in the summer for another 2-3 years. There will be a new manager sometime. So that was the idea of today, is just having a look through. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And there's plenty of people out there, so I think it's probably the next manager will be the most important manager in West Ham's recent history, because it does warrant and herald the start of a new regime. But anyway, that's me done. Take care, stay safe, stay warm, stay humble, keep the faith, my friends, and we'll see you very, very soon. Take care and stay humble and onwards.